From Koreatown, Los Angeles, thank you for tuning in to Ktown Social Club. We bring together all viewpoints from every angle to talk about the issues that you really care about. Don't forget to leave a comment, like this video, subscribe to our channel, and smash that notification bell. Check the description box below to follow us on social media. And I'm Michael Kim, joined today by Ed Choi, Douglas Kim, and a very special guest who just drove in all the way from Palm Springs. He's the co-founder of the Green Party of California and the United States. He's a former city council and mayor of Santa Monica. Not only that, he is also the first sales rep for rollerblades in California while living out of his 1972 VW van. So let's everyone give a warm welcome to Mike Feinstein. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, co-founder of the Green Party, we hear a lot about Democrats and Republicans, and we're hearing more these days about the Green Party because, apparently we're not supposed to vote Green because it's just going to help Trump win. And
right.
So it's, throwing your vote away. I mean, is that true? I mean, obviously you don't feel that way.
I think that unless you vote for what you want, you deserve what you get. And if you continue to always vote for the lesser of evils, you end up with the evil of lessers. And that's
Right.
what we have in our political system now. And one of the reasons the Green Party is getting so much attention now is because people are so frustrated with the lack of choice they have with these major parties. And part of why we're getting hit, the Democrats actually, for the first time ever, paid for a national TV ad against us. They've never done that before. That shows their polling is showing that they're losing people to us, which is healthy for the democracy because, 300-some million people? Two political parties doesn't represent that range of views.
Right.
When did the Green Party start?
So we were founded in 1984 in this country, in St. Paul, Minnesota. We started running candidates in the late 80s for individual local offices. We started forming state parties in the 90s. I was part of the effort here in California. We got on the ballot in 1992 after a 2-year ballot drive. And then nationally, our national party is a federation of state parties that went into play in 2001. But there's Green parties in about 100 countries around the world, and including in Korea. And it shows that it is a global response to the lack of sustainability and justice across the planet.
But would you say it's what was kind of like its charter when it kind of started?
During the Reagan era in the 1980s, when it was just ruthless capitalism, there were a lot of people who were trying to say, what is sustainability?
Yeah.
And then can the sustainability movement, can the green movement have a political arm, a political expression for that movement? And we grew out of that debate. And as people were developing the idea of what does sustainability mean for economics, for social justice, et cetera, we came out of that.
I see. And so were you guys disappointed with the Democratic Party then, with what?
One of the interesting differences in our critique, we know the Republicans tell us what they are, and they do it. The Democrats lie.
Yeah.
The Democrats say they're going to do one thing and then they don't.
Yeah.
So the reason they really oppose us is that we're there showing them up.
Yeah.
And the fact that they say, they try and dismiss us out of existence by saying a vote, it's so asinine. A vote for one party is a vote for another party? No, it's a vote for that party.
Yeah.
And they don't want to even have the debate that there might be more ways of going about things. And that's why they try and dismiss us outright.
Yeah.
Now, you saw the LA Times and Washington Post are not going to endorse Kamala Harris, and some people have resigned. What do you think of this? Should they have endorsed Kamala, or what's your take?
Well, number one, it's dangerous that billionaires own our media. Mm-hmm. And I think as Greens, we stand for a lot of antitrust. We stand for more equity in the first place. Why do we have billionaires? Why is there corporate welfare? Why are elections bought by big money who then get laws in place to favor the rich? So we have to start and look at this as these are very wealthy people who are owning the media and making these choices. Number two, with here in the LA Times, I'm forgetting his name, the doctor who owns the...
Patrick Soon-Shiong.
I knew it was Patrick, yeah. He's saying, oh, well, I didn't want to be divisive and make a choice, and that he said he wanted the editorial board to go ahead and talk about the options. Well, there are 5 candidates on the ballot in California as options that are still active. There's the Green Party, the Peace and Freedom Party has somebody, the Libertarian Party has somebody, as well as the Dems and Republicans. So if he was true to his words, number one, then what they should have done was cover all the parties. And then when you get to the question with Harris, we're in an existential crisis with our climate emergency. Mm-hmm. And the climate is changing rapidly around the planet. It's undermining the basic conditions for life. The Democrats have a capitalist worldview that, well, we can still expand the fossil fuel industry, but we're going to put some money into renewable energy. That's not going to get us anywhere close to where we need to go. So if the Times was actually going to look at that issue, the Green Party came up with the first Green New Deal in this country. And when you think back to the Green New Deal of the 1930s, there were public programs and there was collective strategy on how to bring us out of the Depression. We need to have more of a planned economy approach here, including, we think, public ownership of banks, of the energy industry, et cetera, in order to truly respond to this climate catastrophe. So then, if you're going to look at this race, no, they shouldn't have endorsed Harris. Clinton won California in 2016 by 4 million votes. Biden won California by 5 million votes. So given that we have a climate emergency and the Green Party has a stronger approach and more commensurate with what we have to really do here, the analysis should be you're throwing away your vote to vote for Harris in California. If 1 million people voted Green and sent a message to that administration that when you get in office, if you do, you have to be much stronger, that would have been a smarter, not even if they were doing an endorsement, but at least if they were comparing and contrasting and then saying, these are the options with all the parties there. Mm-hmm. And then the problem with people not voting that way when they have an option is Harris will get into office. There's going to be a lot of big business who's going to say, leave the fossil fuel industry alone. Don't really push on us. We just have to let corporations do what they want, and maybe we'll give them some subsidies, which is what the Inflation Reduction Act did. Well, then they're going to be able to say, look, you had an option to do something stronger. The people didn't vote for it, and why should we do anything more? So it's really dangerous. So that's what I would have liked to have seen out of the LA Times and the Washington Post.
You know, I find curious about that. I don't know if you saw this Newsweek article from like 2 weeks ago where it stated that they did a polling, and I know pollings are super inaccurate, but they polled and they said that it was like pretty even. It was like 49% Harris, 49% Trump. But when they introduced Jill Stein into the mix, it actually, because like I know a lot of people are like, if you vote for Stein, you're taking votes away from the Democrat Party. It actually was weird because the Trump vote went down by like 2 or 3%, and the Harris votes went up by like 1%, or it stayed the same.
Yeah.
Does that seem weird to you?
No, because first of all, nobody owns your vote. You don't take the votes away from anybody, and it's asinine that the media in general repeats Democratic Party talking points on that instead of challenging them. All right, so you start with that. But when you look at the Democrats and why Trump has been able to get some support, you go back to NAFTA, and NAFTA was pushed by the Bill Clinton administration in 1994, which disempowered a lot of U.S. labor with the threat of jobs going overseas. Yep. Then you go to the financial crisis in 2008. Obama bailed out the banks. He didn't bail out the homeowners. Nope. So part of Trump's appeal is talking to those people who have lost the neoliberal economics that the Democrats have pushed. Yeah. So when the Green Party gets in there, we've been for fair trade, for fair trade, not so-called free trade, which is just free movement for money, but not rights for people. So it's not surprising that we're getting some of the people when they have an option to vote for us instead of Trump.
That's interesting. Okay.
Democrats have blown it. They've blown it. And imagine if we were included. The Green Party position on presidential debates is not that they should be controlled by the major parties and the major candidates, which is the case now, but they should be run by the League of Women Voters or other civic organizations. And imagine if we were able to have a popular debate about international trade, the rights of labor, environmental standards, et cetera, and show these two major parties up. It would be very revelatory.
Yeah.
So Democrats or the news media may say that the reason why Trump is so popular is because of, racism or whatever, which could be the case, but there are other things, right?
Yeah.
I don't think the Democrats seem to acknowledge problems.
Ironically, it's ironic you bring up Clinton, because even Clinton, I think he said something like, it's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
And, 20, 30 years down the line, it's the economy.
It still is. Yeah, it still is. Yeah, for sure.
And what's the Green Party position like when you see both Harris and Trump, or Democrats and Republicans, complete support for Israel? What's your take on the whole Gaza situation?
Well,
as a Green,
I mean, Harris and the Democrats are in danger of losing the presidency over that issue
Because of it. Yep.
and in particular in Michigan. And their internal polling has shown that actually Jill Stein, the Green Party presidential candidate, is ahead in Arab American and Muslim American voters, ahead of Harris, way ahead of Trump. So what they've done is, instead of trying to address the issue, even with a small gesture, like they could have had a Palestinian American speaker at their convention. They had an opportunity to do so. There was an elected state assembly member from Georgia who was Palestinian American. She could have been on the stage. Instead of doing that, they're sending their surrogates around the country to try and knock us down. So that, number one, just shows you their mentality. Now, it's a enormous human tragedy. It's being done with our arms. The fact that we're just allowing Israel to massacre people with our weapons with no strings attached. Our laws talk about having strings attached. They're not even being applied. So it's insane. And if we would have a presidential debate, again, I go back to that, where Jill Stein could be on the dais with that and say, why is the Biden and Harris administration not even enforcing U.S. laws about the type of weapons that we're giving to Israel, selling to Israel, and not even enforcing the standards? It's nuts.
I recall an incident about 20 years ago where Israel, I think in trying to target Hamas, killed just a couple innocent people, and Bush strongly condemned Israel for that.
Yeah.
And now, after tens of thousands dead,
nothing.
Kamala and Biden are just saying...
Nothing. They're celebrating it.
They're celebrating.
Yeah. Right, so it seems like now the Democrats, or the whole country, is
Republican Party
way to the right of the Bush 20 years ago.
Yeah, Bush Sr., Papa Bush, actually opposed a lot of the Israeli settlements in the West Bank many years ago and cut off support at that time. He actually had some spine on that issue. And it's called the ratchet effect. The Republicans move to the right, the Democrats chase them, and it never moves further back. It just keeps going further and further to the right.
But it's interesting because I think with the case of Israel specifically, I think it's been actually the Republican presidents that reined him in, in 56 in the Suez Crisis with Eisenhower, and obviously Nixon later on with Israel after, the Yom Kippur War in 73. It was kind of like the Republican presidents that were kind of saying, like, why are we at Israel's kind of behest here? But ironically enough, obviously the oil industry has been connected to right-wing, I guess, like the right for the longest time.
I mean, you're probably familiar that a lot of the narrative from Hamas with October 7th was that, and look at, I'm a pacifist. None of the violence from any direction, is something that I'm happy with. But the Trump administration went down the path with the Abraham Accords of saying we're going to forget about Palestinian self-determination and just try and buy people off with economic cooperation.
Yeah.
So there was a pending deal with the Israelis and the Saudis that was on the table. And part of the reason for Hamas's attack at that time was because they wanted to gum up the works and not have that go ahead. So yes, the Democrats have allowed them to do terrible things. Now, there were also roots in the fact that the Republicans in the previous administration
Sure.
were willing to remove the issue.
No, I'm not saying that they're, like,
right, but it's
obviously
both.
he killed Soleimani too. So Trump killed Soleimani.
Yes, yeah,
I'm not saying that they're like neutral on the issue. But
the interesting thing is under what circumstances could we have peace and justice and self-determination for everybody who lives there in that area? And certainly there's a lot of talk about, well, is it one state? Is it two states? Are there trades of land, etc.? But what is the cultural and human process that's going to happen for everybody who lives there to know each other and be able to agree to live with each other? So I think about, as we hopefully can bring the military madness to an end and look at what the next steps are going to be, we have to be looking at cross-cultural connections, people like in South Africa, where they had a process after apartheid where they put everything out. There was a peace and reconciliation process where the country bore its wounds and everybody heard everybody's stories. I think that there needs to be some process like that as well. And hopefully we can get to that.
I remember Dave Chappelle mentioned that too. Yeah. Okay. So, we're in LA. We have
and we love LA. Go Dodgers.
Go Dodgers. I don't watch baseball, but
fuck the Yankees.
But you don't watch baseball and you're wearing that?
I watch Ohtani highlights. No, someone gave this to me as a gift about 30 minutes ago, so I'm just wearing it. It's a World Series.
Cool.
World Series.
Great.
Limited edition one. I think it's from Dodger Stadium. So thank you for the gift giver.
Thank you for letting him be a poser.
Yeah, I'm a poser. So, we're in LA, and I've known this guy since like 2016, and he was like 25 at the time. Now he's our LA City Controller. You know Kenneth, right?
Yes, he's great.
Kenneth was a Democrat, and then he was a Bernie supporter.
Yeah.
And after how he saw the DNC screwed over Bernie in 2016, I believe he joined. Yeah, and he joined the Green Party.
Yes.
And then Kenneth ran as a Green Party candidate. But when he most recently ran for controller, I actually interviewed him here.
Oh, great.
And I asked him, he's like, oh, don't ask me about this or this. And I was like, so afterwards, I'm like, hey, are you not a Green anymore? He goes, between us, yeah. So I guess he made a strategic decision, perhaps. No, he made a strategic decision, I guess. Like, if you're going to run for something, you got to run for a Democrat in LA, I guess. Just like Rick Caruso, he was a Democrat when he ran as mayor, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think when you see, like, I know Kenneth's values and thinking is still probably more aligned with the Greens, but...
Yes, yeah. So first of all, he had one of the highest percentages of any Green who ran for Congress in our history, number one, when he ran. So that was fantastic.
That is cool.
And the issue when people like Kenneth have to make these strategic choices is a function of the fact that we don't have a functioning democracy, in the sense that we don't have a viable multi-party democracy. We have a duopoly, two parties, two wings of the same machine, however you want to phrase it. And if we had a system in this state where we had 5 or 6 parties that were all viable, all had representation in the state legislature, they would all have a lot more members, he could have run as a Green. And the way that you get to those kind of systems is to go, instead of our single seat, winner-take-all district elections where we elect one person at a time, whether it's for the LA City Council, the state legislature, the U.S. Congress, to multi-seat districts with proportional representation. And what that means is if a party gets 20% of the vote, they win 20% of the seats. Another party gets 30%, they win 30% of the seats, etc. With the diversity we have in every sense of the word in this state, we would have 5 or 6 parties easily in the state legislature, and that would change the whole dynamic. So yeah, Kenneth made a decision like that, but it wasn't, as you know, based on values. His politics are very progressive. We're the party that best matches his values, but he had to go ahead and block Paul Koretz from getting Democratic Party strategically from Paul Koretz, who was a outgoing city council member who was his main competitor in that race. He had to block him from getting endorsements from the Democratic Party, the county party, the local clubs, etc., which he was able to do as a Democrat, which opened up the viability of his campaign to grow in the beautiful grassroots way that it did, but it removed the machine endorsements that his main opponent could have had.
Oh, okay. And do you still talk to him today, or?
I have not talked to him in person for a while, but it's not for any bad political reason. It's,
okay.
Life.
I mean, it's life, and the
He's
man's
busy, right?
And I actually I spend about half of every year traveling internationally.
Wow.
Including in Korea. In June 2023, we had a global Green Party Congress there. And I was actually in a press conference at the Korean Parliament when I was there, and went to the demilitarized zone and all those sort of things that you do.
So would you say that that climate change is the kind of like the most important unifying aspect of the party, or is it just anti-capitalism in general?
So, of course, the two are interconnected.
Sure.
That unlimited growth on a finite planet
Sure.
is impossible.
Yeah.
And therefore, our approach as Greens is to try and think, what are the rhythms of the planet? How do we construct an ecologically based economy to go ahead and survive in this world?
So then, knowing that, like, how does your party feel about Marxism-Leninism then?
Yeah. So, look, there's a mix of people in the Green Party. There are deep ecologists. There are very radical environmentalists, there are feminists, there are Marxists, there are socialists. It's a mix. But we're all based on what are called 10 key values. And kind of the four prominent ones are ecological wisdom, the rhythms of the planet, social justice, grassroots democracy, and nonviolence.
Yeah, see, that last part does not jive with Leninism.
No, that's right. But people come from different traditions then.
Sure.
And those are unifying principles. And then we think, how do we develop public policy based on those? And one of the things that the Democratic Convention did this year, speaking of nonviolence, is they removed their opposition to capital punishment, to the death penalty of murder by the state. They removed it from their platform because they weren't going to campaign, just like they got rid of Bernie Sanders. They were going to disregard the progressives and the left and just try and pick up some more Republicans. So this
is Democrats.
The Democrats, yeah. So, I mean, it's a really big difference. For us, we've never, ever supported the death penalty. Obviously, it's applied disproportionately at certain parts of our society, but also we just reject that as an approach to start with. And that's a big difference between us and the Dems who just are trying to go what is politically useful at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Okay, now I recently, after seeing, when I saw AOC talking crap about...
So pathetic.
Yeah, talking crap about Jill Stein, that motivated me to actually become a Green.
Yeah.
Because my hatred for AOC. And I voted for Stein, but I forgot what I was already registered as, because I don't think I ever voted for president before. And I noticed I was registered as Peace and Freedom.
You didn't vote last time? 2020?
Not for president.
Oh, okay.
So I was Peace and Freedom, which I think represents PSL, Party Socialism?
Yeah.
So what is the difference between, say, Peace and Freedom and the Green Party?
Well, probably the most important thing is we're a national political party. They're a one-state political party.
One state?
Yeah.
Which state are they?
Here.
Oh.
PSL is only in California.
Peace and Freedom Party is a one-state party. PSL activists have organized the most inside the Peace and Freedom Party to win a majority of the leadership seats. So they're able to help, like, for example, Cornel West, who blew it by not running as a Green in this past time, he tried to get their ballot line. He couldn't do it because the PSL people wanted somebody else. But, I mean, for us, we're a national political party. We're present in almost every state, and we have to have a national presence for a variety of reasons. So the best situation would be if our laws did allow for there to be some joint lists, electoral lists, where we could run together with Peace and Freedom. For example, in a lot of European democracies where they have proportional representation, you can have two parties who might join together for a particular election, and maybe if there are 20 seats up, it might be 1, 3, 5, 7 for one party, 2, 4, 6 with the other. So it would be great if we could cooperate with Peace and Freedom, but we do cooperate with them on pushing for proportional representation and to get rid of the insanely dumb top two system we have in California. The Libertarians are with us on that one as well.
Okay, so the Libertarians, Peace and Freedom, and Green do unite over...
Yeah, on electoral reform issues for sure. Okay. And think about, again, if we had a multi-party democracy, the Libertarians and the Greens on a federal level were the main people who would oppose the U.S. invasion of Iraq, for example.
Right.
If we had a Congress, which our platform from the Greens is to enlarge the size of the Congress. It hasn't gone up since 1910. Obviously, the population of the country has increased greatly, so representation is less. And to go to proportional representation. In that scenario, you would have had Greens, you would have had Libertarians, we would have united around both a lot of civil liberty issues, and then we would have united also in protesting the war at that time. And now, here's the thing about proportional representation and why, going back to AOC, now, you can say, do you change the system or does the system change you? And I think we have to be concerned. You can be effective, you can be mature, you can try and govern, but you can't let the system manipulate you. And the fact that she went out as a surrogate to attack our party without facts was pretty pathetic. But when she got into office, she was pushing on the climate. And you may remember in her first week in office, she went and sat in at Pelosi's office with the Sunrise Movement, the young people, who, by the way, the Sunrise Movement didn't endorse Harris either because her climate approach is so mediocre. But what happens then is there's only a small number of single-seat winner-take-all districts where you have a chance of electing a Democrat who is exceptional on the climate. Now, what does that mean when you have millions of young people who are rightfully terrified about the future because of that? In a proportional representation system, what happens then is, let's say, in our current system, if the Green Party vote goes up from 5% to 10%, we don't win seats either way. In a proportional representation system, we'd win more seats. And then what happens? There's pressure on the Democrats to change their position on the climate catastrophe, or else they continue to lose power to us. So that puts proportional representation systems put a lot more power in the hands of the voter to affect change. But right now there's not a lever because they're just going to say, well, you vote Green, you're going to help elect a Republican, which is bullshit, but that's all they can say, and they operate out of fear instead of on policy. And we're saying to people, you have a chance to vote for a better world, and you're not going to get it unless you vote for it. But we also have, but the point is, we have the electoral reform, ranked choice voting, proportional representation. We offer,
all good.
these
things happen.
Cell phones, man.
Is it Jill?
Yeah, she's saying, hey, you forgot that one extra point. Anyway, let's keep going. That was a distraction, but
okay.
So what's the disconnect then? If there's so many young generational people who are so scared about the climate, then what's keeping the Green Party from being overtaken by the young generation? Why are we not voting for them? Especially as because I get it, 20, 30 years ago, it's oh no, the world is ending. Okay, whatever. But we've literally been watching as there are storms that are coming up out of nowhere. I mean, literally, I just watched a documentary where these badass grandmothers in Korea go diving for seafood, and they've been literally watching the ocean die. They've been watching over the last couple decades as there are all of a sudden marine life from more tropical areas now living in South Korea because the waters are warmer. Right. They're seeing as the sea life is dying out, there's no more food left in the ocean. So why is there such a big disconnect?
Right. So a couple things happen. The establishment environmental groups, who do endorsements, their leadership wants access. And they buy into the idea that, well, minor parties aren't going to win. We're going to do the best we can to try and at least keep the door open. So we're going to kiss the you-know-what of the major party candidates, and especially the Democrats, in the hope that they'll take a meeting with us later, and then they'll water down, but at least take some ideas from us. And that's kind of the status of the political system. Now, the difference, and why I'm saying that it's a wasted vote for Harris in California, and why, if you care about the climate, you should be voting Green, is that as a voter, you don't have to worry about access. You have to worry about what message you're sending with your vote. And other than the 7 so-called swing states, it's obvious who's going to win either way. So then the question becomes, how do you actually present that option to young people when 99% of the propaganda machine from the Democrats that is repeated by NPR, that's repeated by everyone, is telling them you can't risk voting Green, even in a state like California where there's no issue at all. No. So if somebody like myself and many other Greens who can make this case actually were allowed to make the case, I wrote a fantastic column that I sent to the UC Berkeley paper a month and a half ago, laying out why this is the path for young people and specifically showing why the Democrats' approach on climate was not sufficient. Couldn't get it into print. I sent it to several UC papers, couldn't get it into print anywhere. We ended up having to print it from our national party website because no media would pick it up. And a lot of the media is afraid to go against the mainstream machine parties. So it's tough, and thank you for having your program, but we don't get a chance to have young people hear the argument that they have an option.
Have you thought about like having people who are young people who are already within the party speak out to the masses directly, like through social media? Because I mean, like, again, if there are so many people, because like I'm one of them, like there's literally a ticking time, right? Yeah. Where was it, in New York somewhere, where it literally is counting down till the point of no return, where the planet's going to die. So like, if that's the case, and like there's so many of us who are scared, there must be internal representation that we might be able to have someone who looks like the people that you're trying to reach stand up and say, hey, look, guys, if we want the planet to live for us, these are the steps that we need to do, and we need to do this.
Agreed. We are riding the TikTok wave. We have gotten so much more attention, including young Greens speaking. So yes, we're doing that, and this time the test question is going to be, what's going to happen in the next couple electoral cycles? Are some of those young people going to be willing to run as candidates as Greens?
Right.
And one of the disasters of the Bernie Sanders campaigns was that he, and if this is a word, he sheepdogged a lot of young progressive activists of color into the Democratic Party in 2016 with the idea of, we're going to take them back and we're going to move the Democratic Party to the left. Look how that didn't work so well. And they've cast Bernie Sanders aside and they've gone nowhere. But we lost thousands and thousands of young people who went into the Dems because of that messaging. And I think that the obnoxious approach by AOC in trying to hit Jill Stein has turned off a lot of young people, and it's now backfiring on them. The Breakfast Club we were on. Angela, what an embarrassment. And the thing is, the Democrats are punching down, and they're punching left. And that's a bad look. And rank and file regular people are seeing that. Yeah. And that's helping us a lot.
Yeah, I mean, them pushing out Bernie Sanders is a big part of the reason why I personally started to lose faith in the DNC, which wasn't even that rooted anyway. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I feel you.
And imagine if we had proportional representation that you could scare the what out of them.
Yeah, speaking of like AOC and Bernie, then how do you feel about, the DSA, and also, I guess, piggyback off that, how do you feel about the PSL and the CPUSA as well?
Yeah, I mean, so with DSA, they constantly have an internal tension. Should we stay inside the Dems? Should we work for another party? Mm-hmm. And I wish the ones that had the balls to do it would just
leave.
Yeah. And just decide to, and the thing is that unlike other so-called third-party efforts, number one, we're still there. In the early 90s, there was a group called the Labor Party Advocates that was supposed to start Labor Party. The National Organization for Women had something called the 21st Century Party. They were going to try and launch a new party. There was something called the New Party. And they're all gone. We're still here. So we actually have a model that works. And why does it work? Because we're bottom up. We focus on local races. One of the sickening things about the Democratic Party surrogates' attacks on us is they say, oh, Jill Stein shows up every 4 years. There's no base to the party. They just run for president. That's bullshit. So at gpelections.org, that's our national elections database website. I'm the database manager for that. We've had about a little over 1,500 Greens who have gotten elected over the years in the country. Wow. And when you compare that to, like, remember Ross Perot, Reform Party, they had all this attention? Well, that was a top-down billionaire-led effort. That disappeared when the personality person went away. We subsist and exist and continue to grow because we get people into local government. We actually are successful. Our incumbent city council members, school board members win 80 to 90% of the time. Wow. And that shows that we have good ideas.
So it might be like even the premier grassroots
party.
Oh,
yeah, we are in since the 1890s. I mean, yeah, we are. Yeah. And that's why it makes sense to actually join us, because if we want to argue for electoral reform changes on a higher level, proportional representation, public financing, fair ballot access, a fair debate access, ranked choice voting for single seat races like governor or president, you have to say, look, these people show that they can govern in local government. They're not some crazy whatevers. And therefore, why aren't they being elected at a higher level? It's because the electoral system in your community, if you have a record, you've been working on local issues, you've been on some local boards and commissions, you can get elected without massive big money and party affiliation, but you can't on a higher level. But we've shown that we have value at these lower levels.
And what about the PSL and the CPOC? Do you have any thoughts on those orgs?
I really embrace people trying to organize around their platforms. And, you can say, well, are there splinters on the left? Look, if we had a proportional representation system, then the more the merrier.
Sure.
And sometimes some of those parties, the smaller parties, will run independent. Will they clear the threshold to win seats or not? Maybe, maybe not. We see in European democracies this happens all the time, and then there are coalitions. So there are times where we might have a coalition with PSL over certain candidates, and sometimes they might want to run independently. But it's the electoral system that's holding them back, and I certainly support them organizing. And they're on the ballot here in California.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I've got a question about Bernie.
Yeah.
I first heard about him maybe 15 years ago. He was like this older guy. He was always talking about democratic socialism.
Yep.
And then at that time, socialism was still like a bad word. You couldn't really talk about it. But I was curious. I was like, what is socialism anyway? Like, I'm like, wait, I don't know. It doesn't seem so bad. What's wrong about this? But anyway, eventually I was like, okay, I think I like this Bernie guy. I support him. And I supported him 2016, 2020. But after 2020, I started to feel like, has he been tricking us this whole time? Like, I felt like he's there as sort of like a plant to just get you all riled up, say all the right things, but at the end of the day, vote for Joe, vote for Kamala. Something like, what is that term you said? Sheepdog? Is that the term?
Yep.
Is it possible that he's actually a really evil dude? Or
Right. I don't think he's an evil dude, but I think that he accepts the premises of the duopoly. Mm-hmm. And he's limited. We all have our limitations as human beings. I'm not going to castigate him, but I will call out, and as Greens we do call out where we think his strategies have failed. And one of his signature issues is a Medicare for all universal health care system. Mm-hmm. And I was, we had Prop 86 back in 1994, which was a single-payer ballot measure back there. I was a local coordinator for that effort. Well, what happens with the Democratic Party that Bernie is funneling people into? Here in California, when there is legislation in the legislature for a Medicare for All plan, when there is a Republican in office, like Schwarzenegger, the Democrats in the legislature pass it because they know that the Republican will veto it. When there's a Democrat in office like Newsom, who said he was for a universal health care, Medicare for All program when he ran in 2018, they can't get it out of committee because they don't want to. They know that the leadership of the party won't support it.
You've heard of Malcolm X's ballot or bullet speech, right? In 1964. I mean, he says all these things about like Goldwater and like you're just a chump if you just keep voting Democrats. Yeah. And I think in Lyndon B. Johnson even said something like, "I'll have these N-words voting Democrat for 200 years," and so like they knew back in the 60s that these people were corrupt and just dangling promises that they'll never keep. That's why like you said before, we know who the Republicans are because they say who they are.
We can believe them.
But the Democrats, they fucking want to take credit for being not the Republicans, right. But they do the same exact shit.
Right.
So they're just like scummier to me, in my opinion.
Yeah, they're worse.
Why are they not pushing for it, do you think? Is it because they're taking pharma money?
I mean, they're taking corporate money on multiple levels. Yeah. And this is so effing sickening, as a result of the Nixon Watergate scandal, in 1974, the Congress passed the Presidential Funding Act to provide matching funds for candidates in the primary and then some public financing for the general to try and get rid of the dirty money issue. Well, what's happened over the years, as the major party candidates have chosen that they can raise more money separate from accepting the public financing, because when you accept the public financing, you accept a spending limit at a certain level. And Obama is the one who killed that program in 2008. He said, I'm not going to take any public money. I want to be free to raise as much as possible. What has happened is it was the Green Party primarily that's been using the matching funds process to gain enough money, and we have to raise a certain amount of money in at least $5,000 minimum in 20 states to qualify. And then all donations at $250 and under are matched on a one-to-one basis. Now, because the Democrats and Republicans make the ballot access laws in the first place, and we have some of the most complicated and difficult ballot access laws in the world, we need to raise this money from the primaries and gain the matching funds to pay for the signature drives to qualify for the ballot. So when the Democrats got in 2018 and they got a majority in the House, their first act was called the For the People Act. And this was going to be their big democracy bill and do all these good things. In there was a secret passage that was going to raise the threshold to qualify for the matching funds much higher so that the Green candidates couldn't qualify for the money, and then we couldn't get on the ballot across the country. And we called out, including Common Cause, electoral reform, good government group that does a lot of good work, but they were on board with this and willing to throw us under the bus in order to they were going to get something else out of it. They were going to get some public financing for congressional races in order to agree to go along with this. So fortunately, in this case, because of the filibuster in the Senate, the Republicans weren't going to go along with it for other reasons, and they couldn't move it ahead. I'm bringing this back to the point about the corruptions in the Democrats is that they are beholden to big money, who pays for you, owes you, or owns you to a large degree. And that's why even if there are grassroots people, the Bernie people, for example, the power in the party is paid for. Big Pharma. And you go back to the socialism question. As Greens, we think that we have socialism for corporations and capitalism for the rest of us.
Yeah. I mean,
Right.
Lloyd Austin was former Raytheon exec, right? So, I mean, there's military-industrial complex
Yes.
all over.
And it required a special vote for him to become the defense secretary.
Yeah.
Normally, you can't have a revolving door, but there's
Right.
an out. And there's some supermajority vote that you need in order to do that, and the Congress went ahead and did that.
Yeah.
So do you see the United States of America as a democratic country then?
Well, remember, we didn't have a democracy until we got rid of poll taxes and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So women didn't have the right to vote for a long time, and then especially African Americans didn't really have a viable way to vote. So we've only had the baby steps of a democracy since 1965, and we shouldn't be fooling ourselves that it's this 200-plus year democracy.
But we have 200-plus years of a system that was built up to not be a democracy.
Yes, we do.
Just want to make that clear.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we started out that you had to be a white property owner to have a voice at all, and the Electoral College has racist basis as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of big problems with our system, but people don't want to put up with it, and we're here as a party to give them a chance to vote for a voice to say, no, we want more choice.
Okay, so let's look at California. Southern
Yeah.
California, LA, OC, whatever.
Yeah.
What would a green run Southern California or LA look like? Like, what is possible with the Green Party?
So the biggest issue confronting LA right now is that in LA we have the worst per capita representation for a city council in the United States. Only 15 members for effectively 4 million residents of the city. 266,000 people represented. That's worse than congressional districts.
Comparatively, do you know how many city council members are in, say, New York City?
Yeah, it's 51 in New York and 50 in Chicago.
Wow.
Okay, we have 15.
Almost three.
New York
and a half
is
times.
2x though. It's 8 million.
It is,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, proportionally, we should
but this
have
is
25.
three
then.
plus, and
Yeah.
Chicago is closer to ours, and they have 50.
Yeah.
Now Stockholm, which has about 800,000 people, has 103.
You mean Sweden?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in Sweden.
Wow.
So, so after those racist tapes that came out that were leaked in 2002,
Kevin De Leon?
Kevin De Leon, who hopefully he goes down and loses next Tuesday, Green Party opposes him. And,
I've seen billboards for him, and it makes me sick.
yeah, and
the fact that he refused to even leave office.
so grotesque,
So
grotesque.
gross,
But remember, there have been several LA City Council members who have already had federal crimes. It's
There's corruption all around.
It's deep corruption, and why is that? In part, when you have these very powerful districts, a small number of districts where you're concentrating a lot of power in a small number of hands, and they control land use choices, that's an invitation for corruption.
Yeah.
So we have to look at the size of the LA City Council and the racist tapes that came out with De Leon and Nuri Martinez and the third one. I'm forgetting at the moment. But
then there's also corruption with Mark Ridley Thomas too.
yes, what a disaster.
Yeah. Another city council.
Another council member, and John Lee and his Las Vegas junket, and he hasn't been caught yet. And
John Lee.
John Lee, yeah.
He follows us.
Yeah, I mean, hi, John.
I don't know the story about him, but okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, the larger point is this. The larger point is this. The bullshit racism on those tapes was because that group of people was trying to draw district lines to concentrate power for themselves.
Sure.
And remember, it wasn't just a Latino versus black thing. It was classist even within the Latino community. When Nuri Martinez was trashing the Oaxacan American community here, it was disgusting. It was a classist sort of thing. So that was revealing the tension and the dynamics about what happens when we have this incredible diversity and we have the California Voting Rights Act that says that historically disenfranchised communities are supposed to be able to have a fair chance to elect somebody. Well, you can't have that with the diversity that we have in LA and only 15 seats and single seat districts. So we're sitting here right now in Koreatown, okay? Imagine if we had a 3-seat district or a 5-seat district and it was elected by proportional representation. You would have likely a Korean American community leader as winning one of the seats. You would have some of the other diversity also winning some of the seats. But when it's a single seat, you're pitting one aspect of our society against another. So LA has finally, in a late manner, they should have already established a charter reform commission immediately when those tapes came out, and that was the Green Party official position at the time. They finally now are starting a charter reform commission, and they're appointing people to it now. And it's also a problem. The Green Party wanted that commission to be independent of political appointees because you're going to have council members appointing the people, and the final plans still have to go back to the council before it goes onto the ballot for a vote of the people on how to change the charter and the size of the council. So that's highly problematic. But at least it's moving forward, and we're going to be able to speak to that. So what the Green Party is saying is we'd like to see a council of the size, say, of Chicago or New York, and maybe have 17 3-seat districts or 11 5-seat districts. And then when you use ranked choice voting, and I don't know how familiar any of you guys are with that, ranked choice voting is a way of having proportional representation in nonpartisan races for something like city council. And what happens there is that you rank all the candidates in the order of your preference. And different groups can then win seats proportionally. With that, that's where we should be going in LA, a larger council. And what's at stake for LA now is trust in local government. After all the corruption scandals, of all the land use corruption, which is hurting the quality of life here, we need to really change something different and be able to empower a lot more voices. So that's the approach that we're arguing for here in LA. And what happens then is, and going back to the issue about big money, if you need to win a winner-take-all majority in a race in large districts especially, you need a lot of money. And you're beholden, in many cases, to those donors. In a proportional representation system, you need a lower threshold to get elected. You don't have to win a majority. You win a proportion of the seats, and that proportion of the community elects you. You can campaign more to your natural base. Go to where those people convene in your community, and you can get elected and be more honest. You don't have to water down your platform to get people to vote for you who don't agree with you, maybe.
And on the flip side, there's like less guessing.
Yes.
From
Yes.
the citizens.
Yes.
Because there's more people that you know about versus being like, I read this article as I was filling out my ballot.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I would just say we believe that a healthy democracy has a range of political parties that have clear platforms, so you know what you would get with each of them, and then you can choose from among them.
I guess I was just going to say, like, you talked about campaign financing and stuff like that. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on our current DA, George Gascon, and I guess, like, ancillary to that, George Soros and his strategy of, buying up DAs all over the country.
Yeah. So we both know our policy is that we endorse Greens and we support non-Greens. So we've issued a statement of support for Gascon. We don't believe that fear-based, overstating crime and public safety issues is a way to govern. We think that a recuperation sort of approach that Gascon ran on and some of the other progressive DAs have run on around the country is the way to go. And we oppose Prop 36, which is a ballot measure that would overturn 47, which put more emphasis on rehabilitation and less on locking people up. So we don't believe in this tough on crime bullshit as a way of approaching. So we think it's dangerous. I mean, has Gascon been perfect? No. We ran a Green Dan Kapelovitz against him in the primary from the left. We were the only people who were challenging him from the left. But at this point, compared to the guy he's running against, there's no question, and we support him.
So I guess, like, to that other point, then, what do you think about Soros's
right? So
meddling?
So we believe in public financing of elections. Whoever the billionaire is, that's not how a democracy should work.
Sure.
So, whether it's Soros or it's the brothers that
Koch brothers.
the Koch brothers, whatever your political agenda is, or Bloomberg, the fact that these people, who the F cares what Elon Musk thinks? Why are people like that influential in our politics? That's where the problem is. So if one billionaire happens to support causes that I like, it doesn't mean that I want to give up the struggle to go to public financing. And going back to proportional representation, if a lower percentage is necessary to win, the role of money also isn't as significant as it would be if you can simply campaign to your base. So that's also a form of campaign finance reform by using proportional representation. And going back to Bernie Sanders, one of the problems is he was for public financing, but he was still keeping the winner-take-all system with duopoly parties. So he didn't get that other piece of proportional representation, and he didn't go far enough.
Okay, and we got to wrap up now, but I just want to bring up the Gascon thing. I understand that when he came in, I was like kind of excited to see what would happen and all that. I liked his philosophy and that he was also a police chief himself and became an attorney at a later age. He's from Cuba. All this.
I agree. It all sounded great,
but I think over the last few years, especially in our community, I think many of us feel very disappointed in him. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't vote for him, but I couldn't vote for Hockman either.
Yeah.
So I just left that one blank. But
sure.
I just wanted to say that.
I kind of feel the same way too, because I felt the same way about Gascon. Philosophically, it all sounded great. Those are all things that I stand for. But in real life, I watched as many people, including myself, businesses were shuttered down because of the crime that happened, and people are living in fear. I know people whose houses were broken into 4 or 5 times and the police aren't doing anything about it. So then what do we do though?
But this is also a national phenomena. It's a phenomena of late stage capitalism, which doesn't spread wealth or create wealth fairly across society. There's a lot of root causes of crime, and it's not only in LA
for sure.
that we're having this issue. The fact that we have so many millions of people who are unhoused across the country is not just an LA issue as well. And it's important, therefore, when you have somebody like him who isn't just trying to be a 3 strikes, lock them up for life approach, to remember that some of these issues, I mean, I was on the city council in Santa Monica. We have had a local homeless, unhoused population for a long time. It's a state and national issue as well. So you have to always remember that there's so much that you can do in a local government and not. And to reject Gascon and to approve Prop 36 and overturn 47 from a few years ago will swing the pendulum so far in the other direction and be seen as a mandate for, again, the tough on crime, throw away the lock and key.
But it's tough, right? Because theoretically that system should work, but we live realistically in an actual society where
you look, when you govern. I was fortunate to be in office for 8 years. You have a you have a philosophy, and you try and figure out how does it apply in the real world. And it isn't just a single path. You have to apply it in different situations. And I would rather see him have an opportunity to learn than. And then we go back to the primary election. Again, we had a Green running against him from the left. Who got to see those debates? They were rarely televised. What do we get? We get maybe one sentence quote from most of the candidates. There were 10 candidates in that race. Why isn't there public television that brings the debates to us, that plays them hundreds of times each time there are debates, and where there are more focused, let's imagine that you had local journalists who had real crime statistics that broke it down, that didn't just fearmonger the way Hochman is doing, but really broke down where has it gone up, where has it not gone up, in different types of crime, and had that be the basis and have some depth, and then have the ability for the public to really hear that sort of stuff. That, as a function of democracy, would have helped, and then maybe our guy, for example, could have pushed some of could have pushed Gascon a bit and not just say, do it the way Hochman is.
I guess my question is in theory it should work, but will it work in a real life situation? Which I'm almost starting to lean towards no, because our society is so far removed from that. For instance, if we're saying that people of color, and specifically the Black communities, are underserved in regards to education and the resources that are available to them, and that's the reason for potential crime. So if we're not giving them those resources, but in real life their communities are still held down, then how is there going to be...
So the Green Party opposes giving public money to charter schools. We prefer to invest in public schools and empower public education. So you're bringing that up. Okay. Number 2, we would cut the war budget, the military budget, by half on a national level. That money could be coming into states. It could be investing in communities and improving the quality of life in communities. Why don't we have a higher living wage, for example? Why don't we have a guaranteed basic universal income? Why don't we have public health care that could lower the cost of living? People are saying inflation with food costs. Well, what about health care costs?
I think Ed knows all about all that, but what he's saying, I think, is that that would all make sense if the Green Party was in power all over California and Los Angeles to enact all those changes. But if the Democratic Party is in power in LA, and it will be, right? And George Gascon is a DA saying the Green Party, let's say he has all of the Green Party kind of platform, right? Yes. That's useless because the Democratic Party is just going to do what they're going to do all over the city and keep this corruption or that.
This is why the Los Angeles charter reform process is so important right now. The last time the size of the council was set in 1925. It's 100 years later. This is our chance to actually change how politics are done in the city of Los Angeles by democratizing the Los Angeles City Council, the way we elect those people. So you are right. That's a system in which we operate. But to throw away the key because, governing is complicated. Obviously, there are state and national policies that affect crime. And do you do the wrong thing in one place because you've been doing the wrong thing in other places?
I think
it's a challenge.
I think I'm picking up what you're throwing down. I think because it almost kind of sounded like you were saying the only way for this to work is if it went all green, which kind of sounds like it goes a little against this whole
No.
thing. No. But I think what I'm hearing from you is that in order to fix this problem with crime, we need to fix all of the problems with our society. And the only way we can do that is to diversify the council and local governments so that there are more than just the Democratic voice.
Okay, and
I have one more.
Yeah, okay, last one, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, fair. That's good.
Right? That's what you're saying, right?
You said it much more clearly than I did.
Just wanted to make sure that's what I was understanding. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, as Asian Americans, we are very concerned with, I guess, in general, America's, messaging on China, for example, and its imperialism.
Yes.
And so I just kind of want to ask you about your vice president candidate's remarks about the Uyghur genocide, which has been proven to be a CIA pretty much psyop.
In the last minute.
So what he said, because he got hit on that, what he said is that not that it is the CIA narrative, but that historically there have been tensions between Uyghur people and others.
Sure.
And that is known in the Muslim community. That is as far as he went. And again, I'm not on top of that issue like crazy, but I watched a little bit online of him explaining afterwards.
I guess what I'm asking then is, what is the Green Party's official position on the Uyghur?
I can't say that honestly, I can't say that we've had enough political power to take a position on that because we don't really have people in
Intel?
What's that?
With the intel, with the right intel?
Well, not only the intel, but when we run, it would be normally a congressional candidate that would be, or a Senate candidate that would be talking about international issues, foreign policy.
Because what it seemed like to me was he was saying both sides. Like both sides are imperialists. Both sides are genociding Muslims.
Well, if the question is, are large powers imperialist? I don't think the United States has a monopoly on that. I'm not going to be able to go and say to you each individual country and what they've done over the last several centuries. But generally, we try and fight for local self-determination in individual countries rather than resource fights between countries, which is where a lot of the military imperialism comes from.
Right, but Xinjiang is not part of that. Like imperialism,
right? That's not an issue that I'm super ahead on. All I can say is that our Butch Ware, our VP, touched on an issue that had a lot of people assuming that he was simply repeating the CIA narrative, and he was saying something much less strong and much more subtle by saying, "Look, in the Muslim community, what I've heard over hundreds of years is that sometimes there are tensions between these people and that people, but not on the level of what the CIA is pushing." And that's about as far as he went.
Yeah.
And okay, last word. So for me, I voted, but then I saw that and I was like, ooh, that's kind of disappointing, but whatever, it's like what I hear from others is going to be, anyway, it's the most accurate to what I wanted to support. And I think that Uyghur issue is something so, like, unless you really look into it,
you shouldn't talk about it.
I think it's hard to, because even the majority of leftists will believe this and say, yeah, they are genociding Uyghurs in China. And I think especially for the Green Party to take a position, like let's say the Green Party does their investigation, they're like, this is all bullshit. Imagine actually saying that and all the potential people you could lose who are still ingrained into the mainstream viewpoint that it
was on the news. It's real.
Now they're covering for the communist mass murderers or something. So I think that's one of those dangerous areas where you can go.
Sure. Just to go back to hate against Asian Americans and going back to the LA City Council reform question, if we had a 50-member council and there were diverse representatives from the Asian American Pacific Islander communities in LA on that council, seen as civic leaders, empowering those communities more, it just normalizes everybody as human beings, and you can't dehumanize them as much as we tend to do. So a lot of the bullshit racism that, Trump, as one example with the flu nasty comment that he made during COVID.
Kung flu.
Yeah, I didn't even want to say it. It's just, it's so
grotesque.
It's grotesque. But those kind of actions would be less successful if we can have a more inclusive local government and we can see role models and we can see cooperation as one human being to another in our local implementing public policies for us.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Everyone, it was Mike Feinstein, again, co-founder of the Green Party of California and the United States, former city council and mayor of Santa Monica, and of course, the first rollerblade salesman in California in the 1970s.
Went to high school with the inventor.
Which is very on brand, by the way, because I said this off camera, but rollerblades are like the green parties of like the skateboarding world, so very on brand.
Nice.
Wait, so you aren't running for anything this cycle?
No, but I am considering running for Secretary of State of California in 2026
right. Okay.
to promote these electoral reform issues.
Yeah.
Because Democrats aren't going to do it. And the irony is that the Republicans, who are essentially disappearing in California politics with top 2 elections, would benefit from proportional representation as well. And they're just getting wiped out with single-seat districts as a variety of demographic changes and the electoral system as well. So if they were smart, they would get on board as well. Okay. And at least you would know what you don't know what the Democrats are anymore. They have supermajorities in the state assembly and state senate, but the range of people, my state senator, Ben Allen, tried to get plastic industry reform through for 3 years. And for the first 2 years, he couldn't even get quorum in the votes in the legislature because many of the Democrats ducked because they were afraid of the plastic industry, and they ducked the issue by not even voting. He finally got something through on the 3rd level to try and move to a circular economy. But that's because in this kind of electoral system, you don't know who the Democrats even are because they win all the seats and they're just a range of people. So you don't know what you're even getting when you're voting. So we'd rather see clearly defined political parties, 5 or 6 of them in the legislature, where we know where they're at. And then you vote for who resonates with you. That's a lot more healthy.
Yep.
Okay. Great. And I guess people can just Google Green Party, right?
Yeah, our national site is gp.org.
Nice.
That's a simple
gp.org.
one.
Okay.
And then mine, I had Feinstein for SOS with the number 4, .org. For
what happened to Howie Hawkins, by the way? I voted for him last time.
So Howie is actually in Georgia now in Europe, the country Georgia.
Oh.
Yeah, he's there. We have a Green Party there, and again, I'm not there, but all my friends on the ground in Georgia, and I have several friends on the ground in Georgia, say that they feel that the Russians have helped to steal that election and that they're losing their country. And that just happened, and who knows, I think today there was a big mass demonstration. So he's there on the ground while this is happening. It's very interesting. Very interesting dynamic.
Okay, it looks like it could be another long discussion. But anyway, thank you so much for coming in. Everyone, check out gp.org. Obviously vote for Jill Stein if you don't like Harris or Trump or libertarians or whatever. And
if you want to influence the ultimate winner.
Yeah, if you want to influence it. Yeah. Thank you all. I'm Michael Kim, and thanks to Ed Choi, Doug Kim, and Mike Feinstein for coming in.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you all, and we'll see you guys next time. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Great. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
I'm looking forward to interviewing you again when you run in 2026.
Thank you. That'll be great.